Yeah.
It's a shame, Jack.
I want to call the January 21st, 2019 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. We'll start out with citizens forum. I know Mark has something, and we'll go to the Planning Commission members, and if anybody in the audience has something that doesn't relate to an item on the agenda, but if you have an item that's on the agenda, please wait till we get to it. Mark, you've got something?
Just a reminder, this is, it's not a free session, but there's a 2-day session coming up on March 12th and 13th. The Tennessee Stormwater group is the East Tennessee Development Symposium. It's coming up at the Crown Plaza in downtown Knoxville on March 12th and 13th. And there's a lot of good sessions there. It's designed for, a wide variety of individuals, including planning commissioners. There is a fee to registering for that, but if you can make it, it might be something that you would find worthwhile. There's some really good sessions in there about low impact development. So a lot of the things that we're trying to encourage in our community, and getting some real world examples of where this is applied and how it's been working and those kind of things. So most of the staff is going to try to go to at least part of that. So I think will be a good session.
Does anybody on the Planning Commission have anything?
I have something. It's really not planning based at all. Tonight is the first night of the singer-songwriter showcase at Casual Pint. It started at 7, so people at home can hit record and go out to Casual Pint and watch this later, and they could really have a nice evening. So.
Anything else?
We'll just move the meeting over there.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll sing right here.
Does anybody in the audience have anything that's not on the agenda? In that case, we'll move along to the approval of the agenda. Have any changes or?
Approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item number 3, approval of the minutes for the January 17th, 2019 meeting. Are there any changes or updates with that? Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain, I was absent.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Brass Lantern subdivision, parcel 012, tax map 169, 801 McPhee Road, 20.22 acres, 31 lots, zoned R-1 OSR, Homestead Land Holdings applicant.
This piece of property we've seen before a few times. It's between McPhee Manor to the north and McPhee Park to the south. This is a 30 house lot subdivision with one open space lot. The property was rezoned to open space residential, and they have tried to work with the land and have a pretty large open space in the far western part of the property where there's a stream that goes through there. They also have walking trail connections from McPhee Manor through their development to McPhee Park. It's now been installed, the connections. So they've been trying to get the work finished for a while, but they've had a little bit of problems with Mother Nature. And so it has been postponed the last 2 months, and they really still have items left in the field, but the staff is, is comfortable recommending to go ahead and take action on the plat. We did meet with the engineer and the surveyor earlier today and worked out a number of the subject twos that were in the original staff recommendations. So now we only have 5 left, and most of those are dealing with field conditions or paperwork that's needed that aren't necessarily directly plat related. And we, of course, would not be able to sign off on the final plat until we're satisfied that these items have been taken care of, and that, of course, includes making sure the field items are up to our standards. in terms of what we expect before we sign off on final plat. So with those subject tos, we do recommend approval of the plat, final plat.
The applicant is there, temporarily anyway. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the applicant?
Issues with the subject twos?
No, I do not. Most of the field items are, we need about 4 days of dry weather and
Don't we all?
Yeah, yeah, even the street sign guy's behind because he can't put anything up anyway. So it's, yeah, it's been a struggle, but we are 95% complete. I mean, it's literally just a few days to clean up work and haul off some excess topsoil in a mulch pile, and we're good.
Okay.
So,
I just have one question, and that is that a safe place for that kiosk, the mail kiosk?
yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. The Postal Service wants it at the entrance. It defeats their goal of efficiency to have to drive all the way to the back of a neighborhood.
I understand
And,
that.
and people's, a couple of things, people's habits change a little bit when your mail's locked up. You're not necessarily checking it every day. This is only 30 lots, so there's space for 2 vehicles in the pull-off. And this being like Briarstone product, a high-end, no-maintenance kind of empty nester, there's not really as much of a rush hour, everybody coming home at 5:30 wanting to stop and get their mail. So, but I think the biggest thing that you'll see, and we'll have to learn, as I think y'all are talking about it later, as we progress with new developments and the size and the need and how it really works. But I've argued with the Postal Service on other projects to put them at the cul-de-sac where I got a built-in turnaround and plenty of room. But they don't want to drive through the neighborhood, they want to get in and get out and move on to the next one. So I fit in what I'm comfortable with this situation. If this were 60 lots, or if this were bigger family-oriented homes, no, it wouldn't work there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second,
Subject twos?
subject to the 5
You want
stipulations.
to include your subject twos in there?
Subject to the, approve subject to the
Five.
subject twos.
Second.
Right.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Thank you and good luck. We all hope it quits raining.
Yeah, me too. I'm here for the next one too, though, so I'm
Okay. Discussion and a public hearing on a re-subdivision plat for 12017 West Kingsgate Road to provide for street connections from the Brookmere subdivision to West Kingsgate Road, .36 acres, zone R-2, Homestead Land Holdings applicant.
We workshopped last month. As you may recall, we, staff developed a number of questions for you all to consider and give us and the applicant some feedback with regards to getting a street connection between the Brookmere subdivision that's under construction now off of Virtue Road and Kingsgate subdivision. As we talked about last month, there is a stub out from Kingsgate into the Brookmere property, but it's in a location that's not really topographically favorable. So the developer, trying to figure out a place to get a more favorable approach into Kingsgate, has bought a house lot in Kingsgate, and they'll be putting the street in on the west side of the house lot, basically kind of mirroring the driveway, except extending it on up, obviously, to the property line. We decided to go with an easement rather than a right-of-way because for a number of reasons, but it doesn't create setback and lot size issues that if it were a property line, you would create some issues for the adjacent property owner on lot 24. So we felt like an easement would be a better option. They will need to have you all consider a variance from the subdivision regulations first before you take action on the plat. And that's for a request to reduce the street width from 26 to 20 feet. as you all know, we're trying to make this, it will be a public street connection, but we're trying to make it as discreet as possible because this is in an area that wasn't planned for a public street access. So we want it to basically look like a nice driveway. It'll be built to public street standards, and it will be maintained by the town, just like any other public street. But the staff does support the variance reduction to 20 feet. Again, it gives it more of a driveway rather than public street look. And so I don't know if y'all have any questions on the variance itself, but we need to take action on that first.
Does anybody have any questions on that?
Are we going to, we have another variance too? Are we going to discuss them separately, the 25?
There's
to-
not a need for that
Okay.
variance in looking at the subdivision regulations. Actually, as long as you don't go below 20,
Okay,
you're fine.
okay. What does that, and what's the end result of just changing that radius, just out of curiosity? Does it make it, you have to,
You go from 25 to 20.
okay, so you're slowing down more to make sure you're getting in and staying in your lane and, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
We did feel comfortable that the 20 would allow for the school buses, didn't we, when we discussed this
we
last
talked
month?
about
was
that, yeah.
some things that we talked about that we thought the 20 would work. We also thought that the 20 feet from curb to curb would still allow that homeowner to park in the street if they had to and not block traffic.
Yeah, as we talked about, they are going to construct the section of the street that would go near the existing garage of this house lot that they've purchased. They'll bring that part of the street over to the western property line as far as they can to get it further away from that. Uh-oh.
I know we were trying to get 20 feet from the back of curb to the garage so a pickup truck could park in their driveway and not be
Yeah, it's
sticking out
about
in the street.
19.57 is what it shows on this plan if
Okay.
I
if they
couldn't quite
construct
get to
it.
20.
Okay, but you went as far over as you
I'm
could.
20 to the
You
face of
ran
curb.
out of room.
Yeah, yeah, if I move it over any further, I'm impacting the
Not
adjacent property owner.
It's that area right
Yeah.
there.
And we still have the option of doing like you suggested, a pull-out off the driveway on their property, leading around.
Well, yeah, you're going to want the house to be
Yeah.
marketable eventually. I mean, you're going to want to sell it,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Only 20 feet wide, we can post it no parking. That is in our municipal code.
they can always park in front of the house,
That's true.
you know. And not
Actually, that was our
necessarily-
goal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When we talked last month, it
Sure
was
was.
actually to do some no parking signs on that stretch of the road.
I believe
in
I
both-
showed
Both
them.
northbound and southbound?
Yep.
I think so.
Okay.
Do we have to take any action on
He might.
the posting, or is that something that,
No, that's,
when does that come along?
For the posting of no parking.
Does that need to be a subject too?
Signs.
Town's road, they can post it.
Anytime?
I mean, we could post it.
And obviously, if it becomes a problem, we could post it.
Yeah,
That might be the most logical way to deal with it.
yeah, that's fine. Yep.
My name's Richard Anderson. I live, excuse me, 2 houses up from this. And my
Let's have your address, please.
12009 West Kingsgate.
Thank you.
My feeling on this is, I went down there and measured it too, and I don't see, first off, I don't understand what right-of-way is on the left side of the house. I don't understand what that is. That you can buy a house and put a road through there. I just don't understand that concept at all. Residential neighborhood, like they said, there is another street about 10 houses down, but that wouldn't fit his criteria.
Well, it doesn't really fit the town's criteria. It's just too steep. The slope is.
Does
just-
this road fit your criteria?
Well, this one's a hybrid. This one's kind of trying to find a good compromise that seems to be a good way to have some connectivity in the community.
This street is basically a dead-end street. Of course, you can go out the other way, but I'm worried about the volume of traffic. A child got killed on this street about 20 years ago, ran into the street and was hit by a car. The neighbors haven't forgot it.
Well, this is mainly to, it's, for a better transportation system, but it also is to provide for more than one way in and out of Brookmere.
I
So
understand
for
that.
emergency
I understand
service. And both this portion of Brookmere and Kingsgate are both in the very kind of back of these
Isolated.
developments. I'd probably see you all probably using this as much, if not more, than Brookmere. It just depends on which direction you're
Sure.
going, and but it is a value in case something is blocked at one or the other.
And I
access
understand
points.
that. What I have the problem with is, as far as I know, this house wasn't for sale. And, I mean, I don't know how this came about, but of course, he bought the house, which is his right. And the next thing we know, there's a subdivision coming behind us, one I'm not opposed to, but there's a road come through there. I don't like that concept. I've lived there 40 years. It's a nice residential neighborhood, woods behind it, a pipeline back through there where you can't build, a colonial pipeline, and I understand all that. And now this concept, buy a house and put a road to get into another subdivision, I don't like it. I may not have a ground to stand on, but I'm not comfortable with it. And I've gone down there and measured myself. I don't think there's enough room from the neighbor's fence to the corner of the house, and we talked about that. If I measured 19 feet off the corner of that house, I'm cutting 4 feet off the driveway, by the way I measured it. Now, I didn't come from the fence over. But those people that live where that road's going to be up against their fence, I'm sure they're not here this evening. They're an older couple. And I'm sure they're not aware of all this. But, I don't think it's been publicized very good either. I haven't seen any zoning signs out there or anything. I never saw a for sale sign on that house. And that house is in disrepair right now.
Russ, you want to tell us how you measured that, please, sir?
And the surveyor's actually here. It's all measured based on real survey data. We went out and located the property lines, all of the hardscape, all the existing asphalt, and the corner of the buildings. So this is all a one-to-one drawing with actual sub-centimeter accuracy of survey. So regarding the, I'll let y'all address some of his other concerns, but no, what's proposed will work based on what we discussed previously in the last meeting of, as Noah pointed out, trying to find a good balance and create a multimodal facility, more of a walk and bike and trail that could also be used for vehicles as needed. So as to lessen the impact on Kingsgate. But I think Mark's right. I think this will be a quicker way out to Kingston Pike or down to the lake for that end of Kingsgate.
And the house itself, you talked about that some last time. Can you tell us again?
Yeah, well, we bought the house with the property. Obviously, they were different owners. There was another developer that got everything under contract, and then we purchased the contract and closed the deal. The house we've gutted when we chose not to renew the lease of the renters. And they moved on, and the house was in total disrepair. And part of the reason why we're here now, to go ahead and get this figured out or determined so that we can know whether to put money in rejuvenating the house and selling it to a new owner, or if y'all were going to require us to tear the house down and put a road through the middle, which I think we all agreed we were trying to avoid because it is part of a small bit of inventory for lower cost housing in the town of Farragut, as opposed to the new stuff that's more and more expensive. So if the Planning Commission chooses to approve what's before you tonight to create this easement, then that will give us the clarity moving forward before we invest money in renovating the house and putting it on the market.
That that's what you intend to do?
Yeah,
is
oh, absolutely.
renovate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. Did you ever talk to I think last time we discussed this, either here at the workshop, I think you mentioned you were going to try to talk to the people in lot 24, the one that it butts up against. Did you ever get a chance to speak to those folks?
No, I did not. I think Bob Money, my client, was mentioned that he was going to reach out to him, and I'm not sure if he did or not, and he's out of town this week. But I personally did not know, and I have no information if he ever was able to make contact with him or not.
Anybody else? Anybody else in the audience have questions or comments? In that case, do I have a motion
And this is just on the variance.
on the
Just
variance?
as a reminder.
I'm going to move to approve the variance for the street width from 26 feet to 20 feet.
I'll second.
Do I have to give a reason? Is there do we need a reason for that?
Well, it's always good to give a reason, yeah. I mean, it's not quite as critical as a Board of Zoning Appeals matter, but it's always good to give a reason. I think that from a staff's perspective, the rationale is we're trying to make this, as, small as a facility as possible, since it's kind of being superimposed in an area that wasn't planned for this kind of facility.
Okay.
Kind of de-emphasizing the
Yeah,
De-emphasizing.
the street aspect of it, but yet still saying,
driveway, really.
House being viable.
but it is going to be curbed and
Yeah.
so forth. So I mean, it is going to be a real street.
Yeah.
It's just going to be it's going to be a little smaller than a real street, a standard size 26-foot
It'd be a little less inviting.
So is that sufficient, a motion for, reduction in size to de-emphasize the,
If I may, from a precedent-setting standpoint for future request, I pointed out in the beginning that this being a connector facility less than, short connector street less than 500 feet in length. So then if people come in with a 1,200-foot road and wanting to reduce the width of it, then you're not necessarily setting the precedent for that.
okay, and given the length of the road,
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Interrupt, but did the citizen finish his, because did he finish? Are you finished? Okay. Maybe we cut him off there.
No. Do you want to,
So, move to approve the variance from, reduction in the street width from 26 feet to 20 feet to, now I've lost my thought.
due to the minor nature,
Due to the
maybe
minor nature of the connector status of this road.
in the length.
Yeah, and the short length.
second?
I'll say.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose?
I am opposed.
Oh, okay.
Ed.
Ed is against, okay.
Do you have to do a variance on the curb cut? The curb rate out?
No,
I
I
don't
was,
think we needed that variance on that one, did we?
no, the
No,
sub-
you
We
don't
decided
need that.
that the 20 feet.
I'm just used to
Radius was
putting
okay.
25-foot radiuses everywhere, so I listed it as a variance, but the
Okay.
sub-regs allow you to go down to 20.
Okay.
So there's no variance needed on that.
And then the other action is, of course, to take action on the plat itself. There were some subject twos with the plat. Obviously, the language for the easement, because it is a little bit of an unusual situation, will have to be worked out with the town attorney, giving us some guidance here to make sure we have it worded properly and we don't create issues with conflicts with other rights like utilities, for example, or maybe even drainage. And then we need to make sure that we're setting ourselves up to where we can have enough space and legal rights to do whatever maintenance we might need to do on this section of street. So that's one of the conditions. Then the other condition was dealing with the covenants and maybe a completion letter of credit and things like that that would be applicable for the assurance that this street will be constructed per the approved plans. So with those two subject twos, staff recommends approval of the plat.
And you all are okay with?
Yeah, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, as far as a completion letter of credit, I don't know, we would like to record the plat to create the easement, but we're not going to construct the road right away. Some point, obviously, and we're not doing much of anything outside right now. But later in the summer, once we get closer to completion with the house renovations, we would construct a portion of it to get it down past the house to make sure that any prospective buyer understands what's going on there. And then when we come in for phase 2 of Briarstone is when we would actually connect it up. Because one of y'all's concerns was construction traffic and not wanting that. And so really connecting that might be the last thing we do. So I just want to make sure I don't have to post a letter of credit on Monday for this section of road in order to record this easement to give us the clarity to move forward with the house renovations. So
Just apply that to when it makes sense,
I agree with that.
for that to occur,
Okay.
which is, and it wouldn't
Yeah.
apply for.
So
Okay.
you know
As
you're
long
going
as
to
we're
need to have
understood
this
talking
before
about.
you
Absolutely.
Before you get your first CO in that neighborhood. You're going to want to have this complete.
Well,
No, anything over
with-
30 homes. Is that what you're trying to do in your first phase?
No, we're doing 90, but
In your first phase is 90?
yeah. As long as it's master plan for this, from the fire perspective, as long as it's master plan for this, then we're okay.
So Dan he's okay with you going to 90 homes without having a secondary ingress or egress?
Yeah, and my understanding is yes, because it's
Okay.
master plan for it. So it could be a short term, for the fire, from a firefighting standpoint, it could be a short term issue, but it's not going to be a forever issue.
Okay.
So you can't always achieve upfront the ideal, because of having to phase it.
Well, because that's the back of your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to.
And to be honest, we'll probably bring in a plat for about 30 lots because I've got to get something platted this spring. And it's put us so far behind, there's no way I can get it all done
All
and paved
90.
and finished, right? So we'll get some front portion recorded while we finish the rest, record the remainder of what's already been approved. to
Mark, is that
construct,
making
and
sense? Or have you been part of these discussions with Dan Johnson?
I think that's right, that as long as it's part of an approved concept plan.
Okay.
That's kind of my understanding too. We can double check, but
Yeah.
yeah, because I had to ask him about that with Bridgemore when they were doing the phase 2 and 3.
But the reality is, as soon
Have
as.
the Allen Kirby connection yet.
Yeah. And I will tell you this, generally when I have 50% of my inventory consumed, my inventory being lots, so whether they're contract sales or specs, on the housing side, then I'm starting construction on the next phase because it's going to take me a year
Your
or two
lead
to make
time.
that operational. So it's unlikely we'd have more than 40 units in here lived in, because 10 of those might be for sale.
Right.
Before we start construction on the second phase.
You mentioned something earlier, and I do think that's important, that when you go to put that house on the market, I think that road needs to be constructed back to the fence line.
Yeah,
or
back to the property line.
So
Yeah.
there's no misunderstandings,
Absolutely.
and the town's not going to get a phone call from an angry
Yeah.
homeowner someday. So I didn't know this was going to be in my side yard.
Yep, yep, I totally agree. And we had mentioned previously about doing some temporary bollards or something past his
We did
house
talk about the
somewhere,
bollards, yeah.
And just, really, because it's a closed road at that point, because it doesn't go anywhere, so it
Mm-hmm. Right.
would prevent people from parking down there and stuff like that, so.
Right.
But I think we can handle all that stuff. I think step A is to create the easement so that we can move forward with renovating the house.
Right.
And then we'll obviously work with you guys and staff if we need to come back to get the road put in and any securities financially to build the road that you'll require.
Do we need anything about the ballards in the subject twos?
I don't think so. Since it's there.
And the bollards really more protect their new subdivision than it does anything else. I mean, it's going to keep
Yeah.
somebody from,
Right.
kids from maybe going over into the new subdivision four-wheeling or something. So
Yeah.
if you guys want to do bollards or barricades, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, or-
Obviously, when it gets open, you'll take it down.
Yeah, I mean, the bollards are, $600 to put 2 bollards in, so I'm not, if y'all want bollards, we'll put them in. If you don't want them, we won't. We can work through all that, so.
Any more questions or comments? Have a motion?
Move for approval, subject to the two stipulations.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5, discussion on a preliminary plat for the Ivy Farm subdivision, parcel 52, 54, 54.01, and 55. Tax map 151, 110.92 acres, 214 building lots, zone R-1, OSR, site incorporated, Ryan M. Easterbrook, applicant.
This is just a workshop discussion because it is such a big piece of property and important piece of property, one of the largest tracts that's undeveloped currently in the town. This is obviously between Saddle Ridge and Fox Run off of Union Road. And this particular preliminary plat does reflect a full build-out of the development, though, as you saw in one of the sheets in the packet, they are phasing this so that no more than 50 acres are disturbed at any one time. That's a state requirement. And so they will be doing that. Back in July, they presented to you all a concept plan that was conditionally approved, and it included 211 building lots. This particular design has 214. And mostly the preliminary plat that you see there is consistent with the concept plan. There's a few changes. The clubhouse was originally planned to be on the east side of the access road and over on this parcel, but my understanding is that parcel is not really now part of this development, in which case we're going to have to rezone or downzone that parcel back to R1, because if it's OSR, it would be in violation of the 5-acre lot size. So since that apparently is not part of this development, that will be an action we'll have to take at some
Wasn't
point.
it agricultural to begin with? If it's not part of the parcel, should we leave it agricultural?
I don't remember
or-
if it was agricultural or R1. I think it would be better to rezone it to R1 regardless, because agricultural also has a 5-acre
Oh, okay.
lot.
All right.
That was one change, and now the clubhouse is actually roughly in this area. And then they made some modifications to some of the walking trails, really more logical arrangement here on this plan, that some of the original trails on the concept plan were going through drainage areas, and it was just going to be a lot of messy construction, and really didn't really add a lot to the overall pedestrian network. But you can see from the lines on this drawing that they've got a lot of walking trails and sidewalks in this subdivision. I don't know how much, but it's miles by the time you add it all up, I'm sure. So that's another change. And then they've changed some of the streets a little bit, made some modifications there, and they've added more traffic calming design throughout the development to help with controlling speed on the front end. There's a lot of traffic calming islands in the development. A lot of the roundabouts have landscaped islands in them. There's raised pedestrian crosswalk, a little roundabout in the development. Actually, this plan for, I think, the designers, from the staff's perspective, have done a really good job with trying to work with the land. It is an open space residential district. We talked about the value of that district when they rezoned it, and the fact that, you don't have a minimum lot size, but you do have a lot more open space than you would have in like an R1 or an R2 development. So in this development, actually, the minimum required in OSR is 35%. They've got 47% open space in this development, which is incredible. They've done a lot of things that, from the staff's perspectives, we feel are consistent with the zoning district. There's still a few subject twos that I'd sent to you this afternoon. Obviously, we're not taking action on this, so there's really not anything to do other than discuss any questions y'all may have. But there's a few subject twos left, but for a project this large, they're pretty manageable from our perspective. So if y'all have any questions or input that you want to provide to staff or the applicant, that's what we're here for on this workshop item.
I have a question. The small cul-de-sac that's parallel to Union Road there in the front end?
Yes, sir.
Is a narrower street than oothers? What's the rationale behind that?
They will be requesting a variance when this comes before you for a 22-foot wide street. Because it's short and the lots are smaller, and it's just more, the street width's more in context with the size of the structures and the lot sizes that would be in that portion of the development.
Can you pass one down to Nick? That's the original concept plan. I had just a concern, and I wanted to reference the original concept plan so that you guys, so that's what I've given you, is what the July concept plan that they had turned in. If you notice at the Pecos Road connection, if you head up a little bit, it ends in a cul-de-sac. In the new design, they continue that road through. What I really liked about the initial concept plan was with that cul-de-sac, it really kind of limited that connection between, on Pecos, to a pretty local connection. My concern is that Pecos is a pretty straightaway road, and with this little addition, it's about 1,000 feet. We know what people in Farragut do with 1,000 feet of straightaway road, and I'm concerned that we may potentially be creating a speeding problem in an existing neighborhood with this design, and I'm just concerned about that. So I wanted to bring that to you all, at least for a discussion, so that you understand where I was coming from. I was very excited about seeing this original concept plan, mostly because I felt like this really kind of Saddle Ridge has been existing for a long time, and this kind of provided the connection that was required, but in a way that didn't really negatively impact either of the neighborhoods. So that's what my concern was.
You like the original with the cul-de-sac better?
Yeah, than having it straight through. Right now, there isn't a lot of probably a lot of turning motions made out of Saddle Ridge go left and not right, but that's not always going to be the case. Watt Road is going to eventually develop, and more people will head in that direction. And if you look at the turning motions, it may be easy for a lot of them to just come through Saddle Ridge to get to Watt Road, then to go through their own neighborhood. And I'm just really concerned about what we might be creating. So those are my concerns. I have no idea if anybody else shares my concern.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I just have a question on sheet C 7.5, the zone. It says the subject property is zoned O-1-3.
That's an error, obviously.
Yeah, C 7.5.
Yeah, it's just a typing error.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. He'll get that corrected.
We're going to have 3-story buildings there, I think.
Yeah, they'll get that taken care of. I did not catch that either.
You've got a big chunk of open space right in the heart of this property. And it sure would be nice to be able to get some sort of a pedestrian connection through that open space, i.e. a path or a trail. We used a couple different designs in the town of Farragut over a couple of years. We've had some that are a little more primitive and some that are, 10 or 12 feet of asphalt. But it'd be kind of nice to be able to, you do have some topography to deal with in that center area, but it seems like there would be a way to be able to put in a trail around there's the existing pond, which appears to be, is that going to turn into a retention pond?
It's just going to stay the way it is.
Okay,
currently.
so you're not going to use it in your stormwater system?
No.
But it's still, it has water in it, probably definitely has water in it today.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems like that's an amenity out in the middle there that
And we've
it'd
run
be nice to be able to capitalize on that.
Yeah, we've run the walking trail right next to it.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the pond that's actually in the very middle of the property.
Oh, okay.
Not the one that's up at the, kind of the far west corner. I'm talking about the one that's kind of right in the center.
I think one of the main reasons, or the two main reasons, that's this property is pretty well open, except that's probably the only one big chunk of trees that's existing that are rather large. That's one reason that we've stayed away from that area. And two is the slopes in that area are steeper than 2 to 1 already, and we would be taking out a half the hillside just to get one little walking trail through. So that was our main reason, because a lot of those trees are 30-plus inches in size, too.
So I guess the
there.
difference is from your earlier concept plan, that was probably GIS topo, and you actually have real field surveying topo now.
Yes.
Because it definitely looks like your contours are a lot tighter together on your new, and now these may be on 1 foot intervals versus this may be, I don't know if this is 5 foot intervals over here or not on the old concept plan. But it just seems like you've got this big chunk. I mean, if we measured that, that's probably a considerable amount. I mean, you probably got 5 or 10 acres kind of in that middle area, and it just seems like it'd be I wish there was a way, even with a primitive trail, like a mulch trail, to be able to utilize that as amenity for your neighborhood.
I agree with that. And we could look into doing something like that, but I think the 8-foot wide paved trail would be.
Well, obviously, if you're that heavily wooded and you've got a lot of topography and you're trying to cut and fill and try to create a terrace in there, you're right. You end up taking out you could easily take out a 30-foot swath trying to build a 10-foot trail. But
It have to be ADA compliant.
Well, I don't necessarily think we would have to.
They don't have to
We've
be.
done some. Over
this
at the
trail up here is 18%.
we at Split Rail Farm, we did some primitive trails
This section
that were
up here.
non-paved trails. I don't know exactly what kind of, if they used a mulch or
It was
pressure run
it's
or
a
something.
homeowners association trail. That's what we'll talk about with the KUB's item.
Yeah,
Is that
it's coming up.
it's a gravel surface.
Yeah.
That it's a technically a privately owned trail.
I guess, our intent behind the OSR is, yes, you have a smaller lot, but now the community has a lot more open space to share. And if you don't make a way to be able to access it, and there's just not a lot of areas off the cul-de-sacs, there is an area that is off the main boulevard, and it looks like there's actually a divided boulevard there with a median that you could access it. But it'd just be nice, even with a primitive trail, to be able to meander through there and enjoy it.
At the same time, wouldn't it be a maintenance problem if it's the topography is?
Well, yeah, if you do a mulch trail and it washes out every time you have a deluge, that defeats the purpose. But these are some things that's a big part of our directive of OSR, is trying to utilize the open space.
And we noticed that they did take out some trails that were in the concept plan, and from a staff's perspective, we were actually fine with that because we looked at the reasons why they did that, and I agree with Noah that is a big area. Obviously, that in a perfect world, it would be good to have something through there. But to me, it's going to be a challenging. Yeah, you could probably put something, I guess, potentially more natural through there that might be HOA trail or something, because I don't think the town would want to
Maintain
take
it.
over a trail system like that. It would be a lot of
Well,
potential
so the
maintenance.
staff's been out and walked to this particular area that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
we've
and
been
it's-
out on the property a couple
it's
times.
It's really, it's on 2-to-1 slopes. It's that steep.
It's
it's
yeah.
hard
I
to
mean,
walk a
I don't
2-to-1.
know. There may be a way to do something there. I'm sure they probably looked at it, but it just looks to me like it would be. You'd cause a fair amount of disruption. And to me, the benefit, and I agree with you, it'd be great to get a connection through there. It is kind of a big space. But you know, you can also look at it, all these lots, the way they've designed it, back up to that nice tree-covered open space. It's a real amenity for, you know, for them.
It is.
You don't, it's kind of an undisturbed space. And to me, those lots are going to be premium because you got like a huge open area. You can watch wildlife and hopefully, you know, just you just have a lot of buffer between you and your neighbors.
Well, I'm comfortable if the staff's been out there and kind of walked that area, and if it just doesn't make sense, it just doesn't make sense. And I could tell by the topo that there's some grade challenges there.
Well, frankly, the trail going into Saddle Ridge, Fox Run, in this kind of northeast corner is really topographically challenging. But we think it's a really important connection up here in the corner that I circled.
Okay.
That's forced in a way because it's about 18%. So it'd be a real-
Location, or is that it? That is the only location to be able to get
Well,
over to Fox Run?
we're trying to work it into where the existing trail is, and that's up in this area here, kind of in this space. So it's still going to require some coordination with the property owner to get that in.
Is that up near the power lines?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So that's up there by probably up there by the big water tank too, isn't it?
It's up in that general area. The water
It's
tank's
not, the water
further
tank's
north.
further up.
It's further up, but it's in that kind of area where the overhead line comes through, yeah. And they do have a connection to Fox Run off the trail that was stubbed into the Ivy Farm when I think it was Unit 10 was constructed. So they are providing for that.
Will you locate that on the map?
Let me go to the
By
next.
Stall and Serenity, down at the bottom part.
Across from where that boulevard is?
Right here.
Well, I'm not.
It doesn't really show up that well, but it's.
Okay. So
It's that
there's an
connection.
existing trail connection there.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
It ends at the property line.
Yeah.
Next in there.
Yeah, that's real.
Down there's probably flatter.
Yes.
And they're providing for easements in the event that in the future there ever was a desire from Saddle Ridge to make connections in other locations as well along that western property line. So, but they don't actually have a trail shown there yet because we don't.
Well, Saddle Ridge probably
That'd be
predates a
up to
lot of our
Saddle Ridge.
pedestrian connections.
Right. But, you know, if you look at their overall network, they've got a lot of trails and sidewalks in this development. I think it's got a lot, you know.
Well, I like the idea of the open space with the trees too,
Yeah,
left alone.
Yeah, it'd definitely be
What for-
premium lots.
yeah. I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you if it was, you know, if it was something that was doable.
Well, no, that's one of the other purposes of the OSR as a directive is to try to stay out of the areas that are heavily wooded or environmentally sensitive or steep. And it sounds like that, you know, with the pond and the trees and topography, that meets all that criteria. So there's other directives that can make sense to not have a trail through there.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments?
Mailboxes going on this one?
There's a couple of places, there'll be at the clubhouse area. Let's see. I don't know which sheet's going to show it better, but
There.
they'll have a facility actually in this for this first cul-de-sac because otherwise if you live on that first street, you got to go inside the development every time you get your mail.
Oh, I see it, central mailbox.
So there'll be one for this street, and I don't remember, I can't remember exactly where it's at.
There's one right where the,
It's located.
Where? What-
You
what
marked it.
page?
It's
Near
your right
the
in the center of your
entrance,
green
yeah.
circle.
And then the other one is somewhere, I think, right in this area.
Yep.
Right there.
So there's 2 locations proposed right now. And those are the kinds of things we'll talk about with the post office item. That I think we're already seeing people doing it because they know it's a requirement, but I think it's something we need
That's a good reason
to make
stay
sure
where I'm at.
they're aware of it and that they're providing for reasonable locations for these things on the front end.
Your driveway.
Any more questions or comments tonight? And where do we stand with this now, Mark?
Well, it'll be up for a vote next time.
And you're working on the subject twos that we have.
correct.
Is that it?
So,
Okay. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on request from KUB for a gas main extension along the portion of Everett Road from split rail subdivisions to the town boundary. KUB applicant.
This project is partly in the town and partly in that Knox County unincorporated area. Let me just go to the town sheets here. Of course, you come in, it's off of Everett Road, and the south point starts near the entrance from the split rail subdivision off Everett Road. And what they're proposing is to bring it into split rail subdivision and install a new 8-inch gas line through split rail subdivision's open space along, hopefully to the side of their gravel trail that they have that's actually owned and maintained by the homeowners association. And then that would continue through that open space lot, and then it would cross, it would be adjacent to and cross the town's paved trail as it goes back up to Everett Road, and then it follows the west side of Everett Road out of the town. Pretty much most of the right-of-way, once this gets back up to Everett Road and past split rail, is in the TDOT right-of-way. He had asked the applicant, of course, why they didn't go along Everett Road the entire way, and we were told that they had worked out an easement agreement with the owner and developer of split rail subdivision, and that it was a better location topographically because there were some areas along Everett Road with some steep drop-offs and not a lot of space to put in the facility without doing a lot of damage. So that was the reason for that. It is a little bit of an unusual situation. I mean, we would prefer it to be along the Everett Road corridor, but if this is the direction that they want to take it, then there were some subject twos that we would recommend that they be taken in order to lessen the impact to split rail in particular and the homeowners that live in that subdivision. And those are at your places. Just try to encourage them to encourage the contractor to bore the line in instead of using open trench installation. There's not a requirement from the town that you have to do that, but I think we would recommend that you all recommend that for them to try to do that, because that obviously lessens the amount of disturbance And this open space area, just below the gravel trail, it drops off pretty steep, and there's a wet weather conveyance through part of that. So we absolutely don't want that to be, damaged as a result of this project. So that's one recommendation. And then I think where the facility would come in contact with the town's paved trail, we're asking them to bore to the side of the trail rather than under it. They will be boring at least 3 feet in depth. So that's the minimum cover for this type of line. And then to obtain both the grading permit and right-of-way permit from the town, get the silt and tree fencing installed, and have us inspect that. Then have the contractor make sure that they restore any areas that are disturbed during construction to at least their pre-development condition. That may entail paving this once gravel trail for split rail. I don't know, but it depends on the amount of damage. And then other things, just notifying the HOA, making sure that they work with the homeowners that live in there, not just the developer, but the homeowners, and they know what's happening. And I know KUB does notify people very well. Traffic control measures, making sure those are in place, and then obtaining an as-built once they're finished. And that's something that I know they do as well. So with those recommendations, the staff would recommend approval of this utility project.
Please tell us who you are and give us an address, please.
Tim Kelly from KUB, 4405 or 4505 Middlebrook Pike.
I start out with a question. How much traffic control is there going to have to be?
Really, most of it will be when we're working along Everett Road, just to give the construction workers a safe buffer. Sometimes vehicles will drive down Everett Road pretty quickly, mostly haul trucks. So, and you come around that curve, we don't want anyone to get surprised. So it's really just going to be probably a lane closure. There's not a lot of vehicles that go through there, just vehicles go through fast. So it's really just to slow them down. People really, if they're going to work, or we'll probably start working after people get to work or school. I really don't see any major impacts from that standpoint. We don't have any road closures or anything planned, which would be a major impact to traffic. It's mostly the lane closures, and we'll put up signs when they're working so people know that it's coming, and then we'll have flaggers out.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yes. You are aware about Knox County completely overhauling Everett Road on their end of it?
I know they have a plan to do that. I don't know when their time frame is. I actually talked to Chris Sivier this morning from Knox County, and he didn't have a timeline of when they were going to do that. But we do understand that there could be issues, or they could have to widen that road at some point, straighten it, and then we would have to relocate our facilities in that event.
Okay, because I found out Friday that it's a go that they are going to do that. So
okay,
Chris
didn't know that, but Chris, I can check back. Were you talking to Jim or
Brian Hare?
Okay, well, that's good information to know.
Do you have any idea on the, Mayor, do you have any idea on the timing?
No, he didn't have timeline. It's just that's on.
It's coming.
It's coming. He said that's good news. He had to tell me. He had some bad news, but we won't go into that.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments?
All the way around to the freeway.
If the area that was gravel would be if the area that was gravel would have to be fixed to where it would be paved, would that still be under the I would say care of the
What was it
Homeowner.
right here?
The split rail HOA, or would that fall under the town's care after that?
All the way.
Well, I guess in the event that they did open trench, which I would think that the contractor would be inclined to bore it, just from the simple fact he's going to have less material to haul in and out of that area. In the event they did open trench, then they would be backfilling with gravel, and I would think they would just put the trail back to its current condition. It's not paved right now, so I don't see how that would be.
He didn't want to pave that because it was of the topography. Is that correct? I can't remember. That was a long time ago, but he didn't want it paved
There's
originally.
topography and trees.
Drainage and, yeah, I mean, it does drop off, on the west side.
It was pretty
So that's-
steep on one side, yeah.
And so when we approved it, that's why we approved it for them to, specifically for that to remain an HOA trail.
Because it didn't meet our standards.
It wasn't going to meet our
yeah.
standards, but to meet our standards would have been, it would have caused some drainage issues, I guess.
I think that was one of the issues was
Yeah.
drainage. Yeah, getting
Yeah.
a swell on the upside of the trail was one problem, I think, or challenge.
So I'm not sure that we'll ever see that paved, but that's the only way.
And that's fine. We
Yeah.
don't.
I
We
mean, has there
can't-
been any erosion problems out there on that trail?
some erosion, but it's, I didn't walk the whole thing. I walked the first, I don't know how many 100 feet or so. I didn't.
Thought you'd go trail run it, Mark.
It would be a good one if it wasn't kind of out of the way. It's short, but it's
Good
it's
workout.
a nice surface because it's relatively flat.
Yeah.
It's not
It is,
that-
okay.
Yeah.
It's on a slope is the problem.
Yeah. It's kind of benched in.
Yep.
Some of it's not, but
So we can just strongly recommend, is that what we can do, that it be bore?
yeah, we couldn't really require it, but I think and they may end up, wanting to do that anyway, just for what Tim says, but, it's, as long as they, restore it, whatever they do, and don't cause any damage, I don't want the homeowners to come down here to town hall and, jump on me about this project, because it is kind of unusual going
Yes.
through
Yeah.
A neighborhood.
a development and their open space. But now it's already obviously cleared out open space, so it's not like they're going through a tree-covered area of open space. That would be a whole other issue. But, it's, that's, we can certainly make recommendations that, and in KUB's, good to work with. I'm sure they'll try to do whatever they can to lessen the impact to the residents in there.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with. Motion to approve a request from KUB for a gas main extension along a portion of Everett Road from the split rail subdivision to the town boundary, subject to items 1 through 7.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8, discussion and public hearing on a request from Concord Telephone Company, TDS Telecom, to extend a 24-strand fiber optic cable along a roughly 50-foot section of the west side of North Campbell Station Road, and then along a roughly 350-foot section of the north side of Jamestown Boulevard to service the Farragut Community Center / Knox County Senior Center project at 239 Jamestown Boulevard, TDS Telecom applicant.
This is a pretty short utility project that will be all within, other than the connection into the property itself, it will all be within the existing rights-of-ways of North Campbell Station Road and Jamestown Boulevard. It is a project that is being precipitated by the use of this building and the needs for the kind of service that we're going to have in there for the community center and the senior center. And this was the best location for an extension to be brought into the property. It will all be bored, this project. I've talked with TDS about that. And they will be outside of the sidewalk. They will not be underneath the sidewalk. And so, yeah, it's relatively simple. There's a few of the similar subject twos that we have for KUB would also apply here for this particular context, and the staff recommends approval of this utility project with the 6 subject twos, which I have discussed with TDS today, and they were fine with these.
Comments? Have a motion?
Kind of move to approve with the 6 subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Before we move on, Mark, I have just a question that relates kind of to both of these. Do you make
Yeah.
pictures of what it looks like before a project?
That's a good point. We need to. Yeah, we need to do that because, you know, I don't know what kind of leverage KUB has with their contractors. I'm sure they have something. But, you know, I can envision that one subdivision, you know, having some concerns. So, and that concerns me, so.
I think Rita was reading my mind, because I had wanted to just make a general comment, because I've noticed KBU construction sites and Star, both, I mean, there's straw down on, I'll call them mounds. There's
Understand.
Yeah, I've plowed better than that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not finished as far as I'm concerned.
I've given them a little break here of the weather, but
Yeah.
maybe that's for erosion, but boy, there
know,
would be some really good dressing out and grass seed sown.
We did set a precedent last year with the contractor that was doing all the fiber along Kingston Pike and got a letter of credit.
Yeah.
If you remember that, I think we got $10,000 letter of credit just to hold their feet to the fire.
That's
and,
right.
And, you know, they made a mess. Now, I think they're doing the best they can to try to come back and clean it up. But
Yeah.
I bet, I don't think they're finished. I bet we haven't released that letter of credit yet.
No.
No. Because there were some questionable things that they've done along Kingston Pike that I thought, well, so much for all that directional boring that you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, Kingston Pike and then north of.
It never is.
Taking it north of
Yeah,
Kingston Pike.
these utility projects are never as good as they might seem, or usually not.
Well, and that was also somebody that we didn't have a whole
That's-
lot of experience with
that's,
working. We've
yeah.
worked with KUB for a lot, but I can't remember the name
No,
of
I mean, I'm
of the
pretty
provider.
comfortable that KUB and TDS
Yeah.
will ultimately
I agree.
get stuff taken care of because, you know, they're a community entity, and we have a good working relationship with their staff, and I trust Tim. He does with KUB. He does a good job, and I think they're not going to leave a mess. I'm confident of that. But some of these entities that we don't have a track record
Like
with,
the one
I
last year.
certainly think that that's reasonable to require a letter of credit to make sure.
It gives you a leg to stand on then if
Yeah.
you have a picture of what it looked like before. And
Goes up the service goes down.
I want to make a note of that. That's a good idea. Maybe just video it would be good.
so we did vote on item number 8. We're on item number 9, discussion on the adoption by reference to the U.S. Postal Service specification for cluster box units and wall-mounted centralized mail receptacles. And this is for discussion purposes only. Is there any coming back and us voting on anything, or is this just for discussion purposes, period?
Well, it's really just a discussion item, and it's a little bit misleading the way that I put it in there. I'm not really encouraging us to adopt anything. I think really, and y'all received some information I think I forwarded you from the post office, and maybe some people that have got some concerns that are legitimate with how this is implemented, you know, how it's going to work in certain situations. I certainly understand the logic of why they're having to do this. They don't get any money from the government. They have to make their own through stamps, and it is about less than half as expensive to have centralized delivery like this as opposed to, you know, house to house. You know, so there's some benefits that certainly I think make sense from a fiscal management perspective. I think in terms, at least from a staff's perspective, with your all's role, here, I think is really, there is some language in the postal operations manual that do give some deference to local communities to look at the location of these facilities. So, and we've done that with plats and, concept plans that have been presented to us that this has all happened in the last couple months, basically, for us, even though this was actually put in place 5 years ago by the Postal Service. It's just some areas of the country have been more aggressive in implementing it and others haven't, and now we're implementing it. So I think, from my perspective, we might want to look at some modifications to our subdivision regulations and our zoning ordinance for site plans, because this is also required for site development, to basically just alert applicants to check, get with the U.S. Postal Service early on in the process, because they actually come out and inspect the facilities. They have a local contact person that I'm told is very responsive to the developers and builders and people that are going through this, and they'll actually look at where they're wanting to put it on their plan and come out and they actually inspect the facility once it's constructed. And that's really not our role to enforce this, or what I think our role does probably need to be is to make sure that that the applicant is thinking about these on the front end and showing logical locations and facilities, on their concept plan and their preliminary plat or their site plans, and then, have a plan for how they're going to be maintained in the future. Because, most of these are going to be maintained by the homeowners association, or not. The post office is not going to maintain these. So, that kind of information needs to be in the covenants and restrictions and maybe in a plat note and things like that. So I think that's basic changes that we could make to our regulations and zoning ordinance to, provide for this as one item to look at and look for when people present a development in the town.
So we're not looking to adopt their standards. We're just looking to put clarity in. I got it. So we're just saying, making a note in our formal policy, in our regulations that, hey, you need to
do this.
And then that you do need to show the locations and maybe the type of facilities. Are you using building mounted facilities, a clubhouse, and and pedestal facilities throughout the development, for example, because you need to make sure that you got the infrastructure. This, to me, I look at this as like a utility.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure you got a sidewalk in front of where you're going to have pedestal structures, because they won't accept the pedestal if the post office mail person has to stand in the street. And, there has to be a pedestrian facility for the freestanding ones if they're, out along the roadway. And they also, will have to be ADA compliant, so that's another thing.
They have to be rear loaded?
They have to be facing the sidewalk.
Okay.
If they're
normally not rear loaded. We have them at Renaissance, and the letter carrier will come up and actually have a big key, and they open the entire cabinet up, and they're looking at all these shelves essentially, and so they load it from the front and then close the cabinet back up, and then you as a homeowner have a key just to your little shelf, your little box, and then you can open it up, and then if there's an extra key in there, it tells you there's a parcel package down in the big parcel box. We had to get used to them, but once you're used to it, it's actually really easy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefits once people, I think, get used to it. And, your UPS and your Amazon stuff, that's still going to come to your front door.
My concern is that, just like with Brass Lantern here, them wanting to put it in the front, as long as there's some sort of way that it don't impede traffic as far as,
Yeah, I agree.
because,
And
I
that's
mean, if you
something
had
we do need to look at,
had an emergency
because-
situation, you had cars backed up there, that wouldn't be pretty.
And that is our role to me. Our
Yeah.
role is to kind of guide the applicant and make sure that where they're showing these things are safe and logical and they're appropriate for the development.
Could we require a couple of parking spots, or that parking spots be available?
Well, I think
Because I can see people just parking on the street and getting out of their car and.
I think there should be a designated, I think we should come up with a ratio with a designated pull-off area for a smaller subdivision, and then a bigger subdivision is just going to have a parking lot, whether they have a clubhouse or not.
Well, bigger subdivisions can have multiple ones, though, can't they?
You can spread them out. Now, you got to be careful because the post office doesn't want you to spread them out too much because you're defeating the purpose.
yeah, exactly. And they do want them kind of near the front because, again, they don't want to.
So I think we're going to come up with a ratio, find out what kind of ratio, number of households, and you typically need X number of spots, whether it's a pull-off spot, a little parallel parking spot, a loading zone, or something that's out of the designated lane of travel.
Have you gone to see, what's that neighborhood that they just put in on Hardin Valley Road? The Saddlebrooks, I forget what it's called. Anyway, he has it, and it's got a pull-off, and it's on a hill. So you pull up, and it's a little driveway, and you pull up, and you're like, whoa.
And set your parking brake, and then
Set your parking brake, yeah, and then you pull back down. It's,
See, I think that those are
It's
considerations that we need to think about. That's less than ideal to me.
Yeah, I think that is something that because it's kind of a learning curve for the designers right now in this area because they haven't had to do it for single-family detached. So we're all kind of learning this.
Well, I could see people just pulling up to the curb and parking in the street and running over to get it and go back.
Well, I agree with Noah. I think we need to, and I don't think the post office would have a problem with that at all. We need to require some kind of a designated pull-out so that you're not in the flow of traffic.
Right.
Like they're doing in Brass Lantern. That might be a design that needs to be improved, but they are at least peeling out of the flow of traffic.
And see, I don't know how to differentiate. One of the applicants tonight said, well, this is a neighborhood for empty nesters, and so they're not all going to get their mail at the same time.
Yeah, that's
I think that'd be
hard to-
real difficult for us as a planning commission or staff to try to say, well, it's an empty nester neighborhood, so we don't have to have so many parking spaces.
You don't know
in
what it'll
absence
be in
of
the
a
future.
right, in absence of a better system, the only system that I would know that is a system that's easy to explain to somebody is that, hey, for every 30 houses, you need one designated parking spot. Whether it's a parallel spot or an angled spot or a spot in a parking lot, you need something. Now, again, I just threw that number out. I have no idea what the good ratio is, but I think that's what we're going to have to come up with, and not necessarily try to micromanage whether it's a family neighborhood or a senior neighborhood, because that could change. Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, I've seen
park somewhere else, yeah.
subdivisions where these have
Yes,
been
they will.
implemented for quite some time, and they're pretty simple. I mean, maybe you have to walk a little bit further than you would to your front door, but most of the boxes are within walking distance of the houses that they serve.
Well, obviously, on a smaller little cluster neighborhood, that would make sense. And quite frankly, we're probably going to get more smaller cluster neighborhoods as these big parcels get developed. We'll probably see more of those, 20 to 30 lot neighborhoods and try to figure out what makes sense. I do think it's important that you don't have the mailbox too terribly far from where you park. The reason being is that the further you have to walk to get to the mailbox, the longer your car is going to sit in that parking spot and tie it up and eliminate somebody else from trying to get in that parking spot. Because I could see somebody coming in at 5 and say, well, the mailbox line's all backed up. I'll just go home and make dinner and come back out some other time. Yeah. And maybe that's just what people have to do. I don't know. But I think these are serious considerations to try to think about as we try to master plan and come up with, parking spots that aren't on a steep incline that you feel like your car's going to roll away from you when you get out of it.
Well, that would be,
Yeah.
there's the potential for that in that location.
Well, I really need to be ADA.
I agree. I mean, there's probably a violation there. there's probably a violation.
There's a
Yeah, I think they
contention that
have to
the
be.
But we don't-
USPS rules aren't ADA compliant.
Now, it might be that there is an exception that says that if you have a disability, then you can request the Postal Service to still deliver it to your house.
They do consider that, yes. Now, I don't know whether,
Yeah, I don't know how that
there
meets
is a
the
process for
Right.
exceptions, just like anything, but I think they're pretty strict about it. From what I understand, they really want you to, and that's one thing they apparently look at when they inspect these facilities, is that are they handicapped accessible? So,
What about aesthetic compatibility? I mean,
Mark, do you know
it
if
turns me off, these things, these
There's nothing aesthetically compatible about that with anything.
you just want to blow them
built,
up.
built ours into basically some retaining wing walls made out of brick and actually recessed them in. And they're just about as best you can do with them. There are other things. I mean, obviously, ideally, if you weren't standing in the rain getting your mail, that'd be nice. But that might be a little bit of a hardship to tell somebody with a little development that you've got to build some sort of structure who doesn't have a clubhouse and all these other things. To say that you've got to build a structure that's in the dry so you can get your mail. And of course, if you think about it, right now you're not in the dry when you go to your mailbox out by the street right now. So
yeah.
Well, and then the home,
Even your mailbox at your individual at your house is normally not ADA either, if you think about it.
well, the homeowners association having to maintain a structure. A lot of homeowners associations don't have all that
I think
much
that's why it
money.
needs to be addressed on the front end. I mean, my understanding is like in Sheffield, and I know John's here, there's a new phase in Sheffield, and they'll have to have that. So, I mean, y'all are probably going to have to address that in your covenants, because I believe the post office will require that new phase to have it. And we didn't know about it really at that time. I mean, but
Right.
that is something that obviously now they know about and they're doing it, but I think we need to, put it in our regulations that they, at least need to be aware of it, and we need to see certain things that we want to make sure they do it right,
Well, while you would like to think that most developers would want to have a decent-looking facility, especially if it's going to be at the front, it's still something that I think we need to,
Absolutely.
to be a little more specific, give a little more specification on.
I mean, there's certain, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on this, but I think there are certain post office approved vendors, but they do have a lot of different products, a lot of different styles and things like that. But I don't know to what extent we could really get involved in architectural design of these things. I think we can kind of address the physical aspects of it, but I don't know if we really could push it like that. That they have to use a certain type of structure.
Enclosure.
A lot of these newer subdivisions where the developer or the builders put in mailboxes that all look alike, it's a lot of them are brick. So if you take the cost of that,
Yeah.
One small structure.
$50 like that for
And
a
it-
brick mailbox.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Developer pays for this.
And the developer actually buys the actual boxes themselves.
Yeah, they do.
And you maintain it. I mean, we've had somebody break a key off in it, and I have to have the locksmith come and
Yeah.
try to replace the cylinder and get new keys for it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, that was one question I had too, that you might be able to answer. If I move off and take my key with me,
That's a problem.
has to be rekeyed.
But we don't have design guidelines. When a neighborhood comes in, we don't tell them that they have
We don't have
to.
design guidelines for single-family detached anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Nor would I recommend we get involved in that. I think we need to look at the physical placement.
Parking, I think,
Make
is the
sure
big thing.
parking.
And landscaping and
that's,
things like that.
Yeah.
Those kinds of macro issues. And like you said, I mean, most of the time, most of these guys are going to want to use something that looks good because they're trying to market their development. And
That's what I say, we can encourage and make comments, but we don't
Yeah,
necessarily
we
have to
could
have
do
it in
that.
a written
yeah, but
specification. We'll certainly be vocal about it.
When they say ADA compliant, are they expecting somebody to get out of the car, put the wheelchair out and roll up to it? mean,
I think so. Yeah.
so maybe ADA compliant and comfortable for one person, the rest of the people have to go over like it.
Well, yeah,
The
maybe.
plan is,
I don't know, but that's
Better
my
not
understanding,
think it
yeah,
doesn't
that
have
they
a
would.
tall box.
really are.
You know, you look at the height of these mailboxes, you'd have to, I guess, reserve some of the lower ones,
Right, for somebody in a wheelchair.
wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that could change. I mean, that, you might be switching mailboxes from time to time.
Reassign with you just coordinate with your letter carrier. We have a mobile phone of our letter carrier, and if we have a tenant that moves in or moves out, we just coordinate that and reassign that particular box.
I mean, to me, it's actually, once you get used to it, it's a better system for people with handicap, with disabilities. Because if you think about it, your box at your house lot has got a lot more challenges.
Well, yeah, and you're having to roll your wheelchair out in the middle of the street in the lane of travel, or if you don't have a sidewalk, and
It's really a lot safer situation. Now, it's going to be a change for people to get used to, but I do think it would ultimately be a safer, if it's well designed, it'll be a safer
Except for the
situation.
whole getting out of your car part.
Also, is, okay, if my address is whatever, 1234 Easy Street,
I like that
I wanna
address.
move there.
Yeah, I want to move to Easy Street.
You got a empty house next door?
is it, is that going to be on my box, or is there something else?
No, you have a number that's your box. So your particular box does not have any outside identification on it. Your box you may be 1234 Easy Street, but your box number may be 26. And that's it. And so, which in a way, that's kind of a good thing. People don't know who, it's none of anybody else's business.
Yeah, right.
And the box can be reassigned. So if, for instance, you move and your box may not necessarily, it makes the most sense for it to go to whoever bought your house. Because ideally you would take your keys and hand it over to that person, say, well, you're now box 26. But if you lost the keys, there might be someone going to have to issue a temporary box. There's always a few redundant boxes, empty boxes, just for issues like that.
Still, when somebody addresses a letter to me, they would still write my home address on there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When the letter carrier opens up the big panel, inside the little shelves, there are little plastic badges that are glued to the shelf that actually has your name. So it'll say Rita Holiday 1234 Easy Street. And the letter carrier is the only one that sees that.
Okay,
So nothing changes on your address.
okay.
So you're basically going to have to sort through our ordinances and subdivision regulations, figure out
we
where.
can make some simple changes pretty quickly.
Okay.
And just add it to the
Yeah.
concept and preliminary
Okay.
plat and site plan. There's a
Okay.
section in the zoning ordinance with the site plan.
Okay.
But we'll
Well, I think
probably
mostly for like a
have to-
multi-tenant building is where they're going to get into the site plan. But I think what we're trying to do right now is create more transparency. Somebody from the outside looking in, so when they start drawing a concept plan, they go, "Oh yeah, I got to accommodate for centralized mailboxes," instead of them drawing the whole site plan, bringing it to the town. And I think that's why I think it is important to somewhat codify something and maybe work on the other things. The big one in my mind would be that ratio.
Parking.
Try to figure out what's a good ratio, and surely there's some information, some data out there that would give us a starting point.
I think that's.
Have a trash can there as well for, 90% of the mail is junk mail, and I just do that.
Junk mail. In apartment buildings, they do. These people sit, and I've been to some big apartment buildings where they'll have a lobby downstairs, everybody's going through, and they just sort all their mail there at the mailbox and then take their 2 pieces out of 20 pieces, up to their apartment. So I don't, is that something that we would require a developer to do? I don't know. I mean, it'd be hard for me to, especially if you had just the pedestal mailboxes and then you got a trash can sitting out in the rain.
Got to empty.
Maybe a centralized shredder.
Yeah.
A shredder, there you go.
All right, well, we'll work on
Yeah, there's
something.
no problems there.
We'll work on something short term and then
Okay.
long term.
Okay, if there's, anybody else have any questions or comments? In that case, the February the 21st, is that today?
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.
It's pretty good.